Side. All right. All right. Welcome back to the podcast. This is Gunnar and Andrew. Today we are diving into all things self responsibility, self awareness. Our first episode last time was talking about what strength means to us. If you haven't listened to that, go back, check in, see what strength means to you, and hopefully we can touch on some points that are relevant. But we hope you guys are enjoying these. If you have any thoughts or concepts that you'd like to hear from us, please let us know. We're just getting this going because we believe we can make some change in the world. And that is our hope as coaches. So without further ado, I'm gonna send this over to Andrew. Andrew, what are the values that you want to exude as yourself, and then where do you see those values showing up for other people?
Cool. Well, thank you for the introduction, Gunnar. That's a great question to ask. I had the opportunity to think a little bit about this ahead of time, and the values that I came up with that were important to me, they're kind of like characteristics that I would like to see that I see in myself, or I'm going to try to exude through myself. I like to see in other people. I'll do a quick little snippet of each one, and then maybe we can go in depth into the first topic and hit that a little deeper. The first one is taking responsibility for yourself. The second one is open-mindedness or being open-minded. The third one is taking intentional action. The fourth one is honesty or being honest, and having an honest disposition with yourself and other people. And then lastly, humility or being humble, if you could call it that. So those are the five that came to mind when I sat down and thought about this. The first one, though, is, I feel like, one of the most important. It's taking responsibility for yourself. Taking responsibility for yourself, and it means taking control of your situation, taking responsibility for what you do and don't have control over, recognizing that there are circumstances in life that happen that we sometimes don't have any control over, and choosing to choosing to place our focus elsewhere instead of onto the things that we can control. And at the end of the day, that being ourselves, right? And that takes a level of responsibility. You have to really want to have that ability to, or you have to really want it at the end of the day. You really want to take care of yourself. It also means, from like a personal development standpoint, to me, it means developing your skills, empowering yourself. Empowerment runs like very synonymously with the concept of taking responsibility for yourself, because it means that you realize that you have a role in your life. It means that you have a role in where you're currently sitting right now, and you have a role in how you got there. And when you take responsibility for yourself and you've done things to empower yourself by developing skills and in areas of life that are important to you, whether that's personal, professional, that is like an example of taking responsibility for yourself. And then, it's the notion of, and especially in our world, we spend a lot of time worrying or focusing on what other people are doing, rather than focusing on ourselves. And coming back to like the things that you can control in your life and placing your attention on those. You can't control what other people do or say or how they act. Like the only thing you can control in that kind of a circumstance is how you react to it, what you do and what you say, right? And the positions that you take in that kind of a situation. And I've noticed in my life personally that when I take responsibility for myself, whether it means saying no to a client who wants to work out at 5 o'clock in the morning, because that's going to disrupt my sleep and the time I need for myself, or that's like one specific example, because if I take that client, it might mean that I make more money although I'm not taking responsibility for myself, because that's interrupting with the things that I need to do to put my best self forward. And that's unresponsible of me to do that. And then all the rest of my clients suffer the rest of the day because I'm half awake because I decided to take on a client at 5 o'clock in the morning. So, that's just kind of like another example of taking responsibility for yourself, is that when you take responsibility for yourself, you put your oxygen mask on first before you put someone else's oxygen mask on. You nourish yourself before worrying about nourishing other people, or whatever the situation might be with someone else. So those are a lot of the things that come to mind, specifically in the realm of taking responsibility for yourself. It's something like, it's empowering, and it gives you more confidence when you take a little, you take another bite, you take another step of responsibility, you take on a little bit more so than you did before, and that helps build your confidence up. And then over time, you realize your capacity, kind of in relation to our conversation we had last week, in relation to capability and capacity, like specifically your capacity to do whatever that specific skill is, or the capacity to take care of yourself or to do that internal work, continues to increase. And that all, in my opinion, starts with taking responsibility for yourself. So I'm curious, Gunnar, what are your thoughts on taking responsibility for yourself? And how do you embody that in your lifestyle?
It's everything. It always comes back to being responsible. Starts with your language, because your language is setting you up to see the world in the way that you want. Or if you're unaware of your language, you can damage the world around you. And then what you are responsible for is negativity, bad things, destruction to what you're doing, right? You're big on saying empowerment. That can go both ways, right? If I take responsibility for myself to say I'm going to wake up every day, eat a good breakfast, drink water, and then go work out, and I have that there and I say it and I share that with people, I'm more likely to be responsible for what I say, right? I have integrity in that by sharing it and doing it. If I am quick to say yes to everything that comes along, and that turns out to I have to coach at 5 a.m. and I have to coach at 8 p.m., I didn't take any self-responsibility there. I just said yes. And now I'm responsible for something that doesn't align with what I believe health to be, what I believe gaining strength or gaining mental awareness. I know taking care of my sleep is priority number one. Eating well is priority number two. And if I have priority number one and number two in place, I can train. I can train really hard. I can get stronger. I can get faster. I can be more powerful. And I can be better for everyone around me. You touched on that as well. If you want to be the best coach, it doesn't mean taking coaching jobs and then being responsible for that. And that takes away from everything else. You have to be intentional about what you're saying. So self-responsibility is high levels of intentionality and understanding the consequences or the payoffs for you. And the payoffs are negation acknowledged, not monetary alone, right? There's so much to it. One thing I'm curious to know where you go with is, what's one thing you've tried to take self-responsibility on and failed in your own terms? Opportunity to learn is failure, but where did you try to sign up for personal responsibility and then fail on it?
Well, I will say this is exactly what coaches are for, is to help keep you accountable in these kind of situations. And I've learned a lot. I can think of situations like younger Andrew impulsively and emotionally making decisions, whether it's like, could be my living situation, right? And that in that situation, there were other people involved, and a circumstance where there's a community or collective effort. And at that point, I wasn't taking a lot of responsibility for myself and in my personal home environment and things like that. And I definitely I have failed in that realm. And that's still a practice for me as far as something that I've learned from. But as I've grown, I've come to, especially as a coach, using the home as an example, right? Not taking responsibility for my living space, my living environment when I was younger, and how my living space was chaotic, messy. It was lacking organization for sure, right? And how that, in many ways, for me, that was an external representation of what was going on internally, right? And not to say that just because you have a messy room means you're, a bad person or something like that. But I could see how, for me, it was a representation at the time of where I was at and how I was living my life, because I didn't care. I didn't take that responsibility for my living situation. You could say there wasn't a pride of ownership there. And that's a level of responsibility that comes with, your living space. Whereas now, recently moved into a new apartment a couple months ago. I love having a clean apartment that's organized and well put together with my significant other. And everything about our space was very intentional and thought out. And when I come home, or let's say I wake up in the morning, we talk about our morning routines and our morning practices. We're both sitting in our home offices, where I imagine at least I do in mine, but I'm sure in yours as well, you do a lot of your practices that you do for yourself, whether it might be your mobility work, your stretching and things like that. And your living space, your home environment influences that, right? So when I take the responsibility to no one's gonna clean this apartment except for me. I'm gonna clean this because I like having this situation where I live in a clean space. There's good energy in here. It facilitates my habits and my routines. And now I realize when I take responsibility for my personal environment, it has a really positive outward effect in how I live my life, because in the mornings I can wake up, I have a nice, clean, open space to stretch, to move my body. I have a nice water filtration and dispenser set up so I can drink good quality water. I have a great kitchen space where I have a fridge where my significant other and I keep our whole nutritious foods for ourselves that we can consume on a daily basis, having a space where it's conducive to us to live this kind of healthy lifestyle we want for ourselves. Just for me, by taking responsibility in my living space, it allows me to outwardly take more responsibility for myself and the other aspects of my life that are important to me. So that is one specific example I can think of as far as how I had failed previously in the past, taking responsibility. I used to think making your bed, a lot of it was personal issues in the sense that my dad wanted me to make my bed every single day growing up. So I didn't want to make my bed every single day growing up because he told me to make my bed every single day growing up. And then you get to the point where you're in your early 20s and you're like, maybe I should make my bed growing, and you start making your bed and you're like, oh, it's kind of nice having a made clean bed in the morning and where you can come back to in the evening, right? And not, some people that doesn't matter to them, some people it does. It's just an example for me, but how when I take those little bites of responsibility specifically for my living situation, it has a positive effect on everything else I do for the day. So that's my personal experience around small situation around taking responsibility for myself in life, how I've failed with it, now somewhat have overcome that, now take responsible for my living situation. I'm curious, Gunnar, how about yourself? Do you have any specific examples of that in your life, whether it's with you or say other people in your life?
A quick story comes to mind. It's the power of stories here is great. I heard this a few years back, and it was Bo Jackson telling this story about his own kids growing up. And when he was growing up, his parents had a rule of if you had any clothes on the floor, they'd be thrown out because you have nice things, you take care of your nice things. And how that played out was one day he's at home, his kids are getting home from school. He checks their room, there's clothes on the floor, and he takes all of them and throws them out in the front yard. So when the bus comes by and drops the kids off, all of the kids see that their clothes are out on the front lawn, thinking, "Oh my gosh, what did I do? Like, what did I do to deserve this?" And there's two ways you can look at it. Is like, all right, there's rules you can abide by that are given to you, and then there's also rules you can set for yourself. Both of those play into responsibility, right? If we want to have a certain um, if we want to have a certain way we relate to people, and what I was picking up from you is like, all right, you have your water system, you have your place to stretch, you have your place to journal, you have your place to think, you have your place to eat, and all of those line up with what you teach your clients, right? And there's a big piece in this with, if I can align the what I want to teach, there's a really quick way to get to why I do something, right? Knowing what I have to do can help me teach other people. So very similar to you, like I have, yeah, this my home office is where I do most of my work, my coaching, and it's also where I do a lot of my writing. It's where I do podcast recording as we're doing this. Um, and I know that this space serves me only if I take care of it and use it for that. Like if I was just to throw stuff on the floor and run away and leave, then it doesn't serve what I want anymore. I'm out of alignment. And this brings me to my next thought is the way you described responsibility and self personal responsibility. You used other words of intention, you used words of integrity and alignment, and responsibility, alignment, and integrity are the foundations for leadership, right? And if I'm going to be a coach, I'm signing up to be a leader for someone else, right? I'm going to have influence on someone. So if my actions are in alignment to with what I teach, and I take responsibility for the things I own, for the things I want other people to do, it's much easier to show up and have other people do the same things because you know it's going to help. It's much easier for those things to happen. And then when I say I'm going to do something and I also ask someone else to do it, for me to be in integrity, it's vital, right? Self responsibility is the foundation. How can I influence anyone else to do anything if I don't do it myself?
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. And what comes to mind specifically in the notion of that conversation of being a coach and being a leader, and leaders taking responsibility for, their life and how they live it. If someone's a coach and they are not living the habits and the lifestyle that they're preaching, like obviously they're out of alignment. But like, what does that do for someone's like self-image of themselves? What kind of self-image do they have, right? And if you are seeing yourself as a trainer and or let's say a coach who promotes a healthy lifestyle, but you're doing things that are directly conflicting with living a healthy lifestyle, how can you honestly go forward and coach clients to the best of your abilities, and perceive yourself as someone who is a representation of what good health is? It's hard to. It's close to impossible. And if you're not, you're a little delusional.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And it makes me think of different times in my life where I've had different coaches for different things. Uh, like high school sports, I have coaches who are really tough on everybody. And I understand that now to be they're tough on themselves,
Mhm.
right? The 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 disagreement in my head is if someone's tough on me and they're lazy or lacking responsibility, lacking toughness towards themselves, the message has no backing.
Mhm.
It it's BS. And
Yeah.
it's easy to sniff out BS.
Mhm.
And to build on that, the more decisions I make that are for myself to make myself better, the message gets delivered firmly on time for all of my clients
Mhm.
because they're no longer questioning themselves and me. They know I'm real. They're going to question themselves to see how they can be real.
For sure, 100%. And I believe this conversation dovetails perfectly into one of my other um, values, and that's like honesty, right? And we're not just talking about honesty, like me being honest with you, Gunnar, but it's being honest with yourself too. And as a coach, you have to have the honesty with yourself, right? And like having integrity takes honesty with yourself. You know, you have to be true with yourself. You can't deceive yourself in a certain situation and think that you know what is actually happening isn't actually going on, right? And then to like for the example of coaching, right? To then go tell someone else to do that. Like that is a lot of misalignment there. And I mean, like misalignment and lack of honesty with yourself. Talk about a way to live. That sounds horrible. And yeah, I think back of like to like more so maybe let's say like when I was in high school, I'd say that there were situations like that would happen for me. And I look back at that in hindsight, and I'm like, well, no wonder why I was so like caught up in all these these things at that age of my life that were distracting and not serving me is because I was out of integrity. I really didn't have integrity, I'd say, when I was younger. Not in the sense like I wouldn't go and steal a bunch of stuff from the store, but just having integrity with how I live my life. I would imagine most kids that are teenagers probably are trying to figure it out. And I look back at myself with empathy, and I say like, I was trying to figure it out. But at the same time, that's for me like a specific example out there. Like, and when you're not honest with yourself, it's like the compass is off. You don't know which way is north.
Mhm. Right. And it comes right back to the accountability, which you mentioned early on in this discussion of, are you going to hold yourself accountable? Yes, hopefully. Is it easier to hold yourself accountable when someone else knows what you're going after? Yes. So that goes into one of your other values, which is the one that I share with you when I wrote these out as well, is openness. Right? If I can be available to be told I'm wrong, that's super helpful.
Mm-hmm.
If I'm open to failing in something, I'm going to be better off the next time. I'm going to learn from it. When I close myself off or I'm lacking openness, I'm no longer receiving the message if I'm, being held accountable by myself or someone else. I have to be open to all possibilities, to all people, to all ideas. I can make decisions from there, and I can still be open to taking everything in to make that best decision for me. Self responsibility, number one, right? It's all coming back. So when you think about, actually, I'm gonna challenge you here. What's one thing you are lacking openness with currently?
That's a good question.
I put you on the spot.
I know you did put me on the spot. This wasn't in our rehearsal. I'm just kidding.
No, we don't really all love people. This is all
I'm thinking about, like, I'm actually like just starting working with a coach myself, and there were some interesting conversations we had in one of our first calls together. And I'm recalling back on, okay, it's coming back to me. So you're asking me, where am I lacking openness in my life? Was that the gist of the question? Just to make sure.
Lacking, other word could be, where are you holding back from being open?
I'm not holding back from being open. I'd say it's a practice that I'm working on. I wouldn't say it's something that's currently holding me back. Although in my life, I've, at least in, like, this is part of why I really enjoy working for myself, is my ability to, like, talk about taking responsibility for yourself and the things that happen. I enjoy having that responsibility, but at the same time, it has led me to a point where I am operating kind of like as a lone wolf per se in my business. And my business, I operate a personal training studio. I help people move better and build strength specifically. And I'm working on taking the next steps and evolving myself as well as my business. And that is by bringing more people into the mix, building my business outside of myself immediately and expanding into something that's bigger than myself, right? So for me, as far as growing in that aspect of my life, working on improving my openness, is being more receptive to, like, other people's feedback and information. Sometimes working for myself, I've noticed that it's like you get into this, you get very narrow-minded, you get very tunnel vision, you focus on like one thing, and if anything, like from an outside perspective comes in that might contradict your like current focus, you want to shrug it off because it's not what's in your immediate line of sight or in your vision. So I noticed I had a tendency in the past to do that, and it's something I've become much better at, although it's still a practice. But specifically, if I can be more open in that type of a situation, to hearing what people have to say, to listening to suggestions, whether it's from coaches or future employees or people that I'm working with, and not being so focused on doing it my way, but being open to other suggestions, that is definitely an area of room for growth that I have for myself. And I see my vision, my future for my business, and that is with other people. And I know to get to that vision, this is one of the skills that I'm working on, and I need to continue to reinforce to really allow me to continue to grow and move into that vision that I have for myself. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I like that. I like that notion of, starting as an individual, and you're constantly working on yourself, and that's been the overarching topic, right? Taking responsibility for yourself here. And in that, you're expanding what you are open to letting in to your space. It takes work. You have to trust yourself first before you can trust other people. And that's in any relationship, business, personal, intimate, whatever it is. If you can trust yourself towards your intentions, towards your responsibilities, and you're aligned to it, it opens you, to use that word, it opens yourself up to new possibilities, which you're excited about doing, right? We've been talking about this for months before we did a podcast, that you want to expand your reach, and to do that is to bring someone else into your space and help you do it.
Yeah, no, totally. You hit it right on the head. And obviously, we've talked a lot about this. I would love to throw that same question back throw that question into your court. And I'm curious, like, are there areas in your life that you're working on being more open in as well?
Yes, it shows up in a different way, in that I typically approach situations really open, like too far sometimes,
Mm.
and that can lead to issues between me and my significant other. I'll be like, these people are great, or this is a great option, or this and this. And I haven't taken the time to think about, like, all right, what are the repercussions to making this decision? And what would it look like if I didn't do this? Right. Having all of that is part of being open. You I show up in a way that's, I'm taking in all this information. The more I practice discernment, the more I realize I can take in even more. So giving myself space to take in information from my environment when I'm training, or if I'm coaching, taking in more information about how someone else is doing, instead of just making quick decisions like, oh, you tore your ACL. That's an extreme thing, but really you just like bumped your knee going to the bathroom in the middle of the night. It's like, all right, we got to take in the information. Like, are you sore? Are you hurt? Is it constant pain? Is it something that has gone away, but you're just bringing up to me now? Taking that space is one way I see openness um, showing up for me. And I know I can be closer to my values when I am mindful of what I'm taking in and trying to get as much information as I can. So for me, it's a flip flop from what you're saying. Like, you're having to trust yourself to be more open. For me, I need to take in all of the information before making decisions, so it doesn't hurt me, right? That's the alignment thing, right? We going back to that. So openness is my definition is like the ability to observe and then make a decision with my responsibilities in mind, or not make a response, or not make a decision because I don't want that responsibility. And yeah, it's an interesting one where
I was going to say, to elaborate off of that, like, some of the best decisions in life that we make are the ones that we don't make, right? Or the ones that we say no to as well, right? Instead of saying yes to everything. I imagine that might be like part, or, are you someone who, do you find yourself saying yes a lot? Is that part of what is what you're kind of communicating in that statement there? Is like having this openness, or are you mentioning that you just take in a lot of information before making a decision?
I at one time was a yes person.
Okay, that's what I was trying to understand.
And what that led me to is burnout
Mm.
and lacking awareness around myself. Like, what do I want? What do I want to be responsible for? How do I want to be as a coach? How do I want to be as an athlete? What are my goals? So openness is, this might be something you want to write down, is to tell your story both verbally and non-verbally consistently with awareness.
Tell your story both verbally and non-verbally with awareness.
Yeah.
So you're living it
Yeah.
internally and externally. That's what
Yeah.
you're saying. Yeah. And then obviously having the awareness to realize that.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what you said was open-mindedness or openness.
That, for me, that's what openness is, right? If I'm aware of if I'm telling my story, and that story is, yes, I want to do this, and I'm
Mm-hmm.
going to put all of my effort and all my focus into it, good, go for it. Or no, this does not fit what I want to do now,
Mhm.
I have to be aware of that
Yeah.
and get to be aware of that through practice.
Yeah.
Discernment goes right along with openness for me. And I imagine that's same thing for you, and it's showing up in a different way as you're looking to expand your reach, right? Like you are looking to be open to possibilities in coaching that maybe you haven't seen in the past.
Yeah. 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 I agree. That's cool. I'm thinking a lot about that statement around openness. And when you use the word like your story, is what does that mean? Like specifically, is this like your internal talk? Are these your goals specifically? And when you think about like being open-minded or having openness, and you reference back to your story, kind of from what it sounds like as your guiding light, how to make your guiding light and how to exercise discernment. What is your story specifically? Are these like are we coming back to like your core values, or is it like a specific story around a specific situation? Are these your goals? How could you elaborate on what your story is in that situation to give people context and how they can apply openness into their life?
Ooh, what is a story? Story is what we're living, whether we know it or not. So in my situation, I am very clear with myself on what my goals are as an athlete, as a partner, as a coach. And when I take the time to be honest with myself, see out all the details by writing them down and knowing what that looks like, creating mantras that I can practice that are going to help me become that. All of that information, all of those words, all of those thoughts are the story that I'm living. Sometimes we can live in a story of fear and doubt. If I'm unaware of that and that becomes how I see the world through fear and doubt as my lens, everything can be bad. That is a bold statement. Everything can be bad if you let it go there. I also recognize that mental health has a lot to do with this. Is there's a story that becomes so powerful, we are no longer able to change it unless something else changes.
There has to, as that magnifies in size, there has to be like a equal event, I imagine, to force
Mhm.
you to change or to change that narrative, right?
Yeah.
Would you say that's true?
Yeah. And what you just said there, right? The size of the event. If you're a fan of Marvel Cinematic Universe and the newest show Loki, there's this
My
understanding.
partner's been watching that show a lot.
Yeah. So there's this thing of a nexus event, right? Something that can change the way the world works. Am I going to wait for an event that is someone else's to change how I see the world? Or am I going to decide what I want is the event, the most important thing to get me to that next level? That's a huge advantage in creating your story. I recognize sometimes people think I'm like super positive. I'm going to go with client examples. People will be like, oh my God, he's so encouraging and uplifting and he helps empower me. And there's also the other side. What am I saying in my head to myself? Is that the same message that I'm giving to other people? Am I able to change my story or actually write my story in a positive, encouraging, empowering way? I I hope so. And I realize hope can be soft talk and can talk you out of things. I want it to be positive, encouraging, empowering because I believe in myself. That's why I coach. I want to bring that to other people. Man.
I can tell you're strong in your story.
Yeah, and it's growing every day. I'm open to taking in new information, and I'm practicing discernment and awareness to write that story the way I want. Right? Instead of coaching at 5 a.m., being burnt out all the time, coaching things that are out of alignment with what I like and what I want to be teaching. That's one story. Making the decision to stand up for myself and go after uh, the type of coaching that fills me up and gives me energy back is a story that I'm writing right now. Like that's the story I want to be writing. That's as an athlete, I'm connecting with people who are the best. Like they're great in their own right. For a long time, my view of the world, my story was I haven't made it to that point. So I have no business talking to these people. And then as I give myself the empowerment, the openness to a new view of the world, what's the worst that can happen? But really, what's the best that can happen and go after that? I'm not sure if we've decided if this is like a PG podcast or not, but like know what you want and go after that fucking thing. Go do it.
This is not going to be a PG podcast.
All right.
This is not going to be a fucking PG podcast.
Perfect. Perfect. Thank you for mirroring.
We have established that.
Yeah.
No, but I agree with everything you
So
just said.
I hope that answers your question about what my story is and how that relates. Um, it's also the Nexus event idea can be something infinitesimally small to us
Mhm.
and ever growing explosion, big thing for someone else.
Mhm.
Like deciding to drink water every morning, first thing you do. That's simple for us. I know it is. Like we've talked about this as like, what's your morning routine? We just go, I drink a bunch of water when I get up and like then I do this and this. For someone else that has never done that, that is gonna shake the shit up in multiple ways, literally, theoretically, all of it, right?
Get it all moving.
Yeah, we want the ball movement to be important enough to get us to that next stage, to that
Mhm.
next level. Um, I'm personally horrible at video games, but I love the idea that there's a level that we can get to next.
Mhm. Yeah, leveling up per se. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's cool. Yeah, and leveling up can occur like in small increments, like as simple as like drinking that one glass of water when you first wake up in the morning. As well as you mentioned the opportunity you had because of your openness and how you had the opportunity to meet some people in your space that you might have never had the opportunity to meet before, and like allow you to expand your network. I'm curious, like just as far as like how openness has impacted your life, like these new relationships that you have, like, and that these people that you're meeting, and like how you're being exposed to these different ideas and these different people. How is that like impacting your life right now as a coach, as an athlete, maybe even as a partner?
Yeah, I appreciate this question a lot as a lot of things are coming back. So recently I spent a week training with the four-time fittest woman on earth for a week. And she's going to go for her fifth title in 10 days from now. Right? Like very, very soon. So whenever this comes out, her name's Tia Claire Toomey and her training partner, Brooke Wells, Will Morad, James Newbury. They are great. They have proven over and over and over again that they are the best in the world at what they do. Whether they win or not, they show up in a way that is open to being wrong. For me, I went into this situation really never training with a team before. I mean, I've had training partners, I've had opportunities to meet coaches in different contexts. However, to be just thrown into the lion's den of competitors and to receive feedback openly, this is where the openness comes in. I could go in there and be so scared because I'm not currently at that level, or I'm not qualified for the games to do the same thing with them, that I can easily talk myself out of that situation. However, on the optimist side, the positive affirmation side, I seek out opportunities to learn. Learning comes from coming short or failing on something. Failure is not permanent unless you let it be permanent. I am a success because I'm open to learning from failure. And being around the best in the world at anything, or even just the best around you, take the opportunity to see what they do, be open to criticism from them or from yourself. Like, oh, I noticed they do this. I'm going to try that. If it doesn't work the first time, assess it. What can I do better? How can I be even more open to observing? How can I be more open to myself trying something and not getting it right away? I have, I just have so much admiration for people who show up without any preconceived judgment of what's going to happen. And that's openness too. Like, it's going to happen. That story.
Yeah. Like showing up as a blank slate, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And I see this too as like, I have a story that is being written now based off my decisions, based off my personal responsibilities and alignment. That story is being written now. That's important to know right now. If I have a story in my head, this is where openness gets shut down and locked away and thrown the key. If I have that story written before anything happens, that's the story I'm living. Taking chances in the moment now is being open to failing, being open to succeeding, to believing in yourself. My life is constantly changing the more open I am.
Yeah. And I mean, this really, you hear this statement, but it's like, opportunities come from being open, and if you're closed off to, anything, or if you're closed off to having, something different come into your life, or like, how are you going to perceive it as an opportunity? You can't see the opportunities when you're closed off. You have to be open to it. And that's like the prerequisite is, it's kind of what I'm saying. And, and it's so important. I mean, it's where I imagine, well, I know for you it is, and I imagine for myself too, it's a big reason why we've been able to achieve the level of success that we're at today, and I mean, like, in the grand scheme of things, like, does no good comparing yourself to other people, but like, I mean, for where we've come from, like, we're both successful in our own rights, and we have both gotten to this point because we've embraced that quality of openness. And I imagine that I'm only going to be in my 20s for a couple more months. I know you got a couple more years, Gunnar, but like, having this level of openness at this point in our lives, it makes me excited to think about what the future entails. And like for us us personally, professionally, like in our athletics and other physical endeavors, like what is possible, and at the end of the day, like what's possible is the stories that we tell ourselves and the bar that we set for ourselves. And it really, at the end of the day, like we can accomplish big things if we keep our minds focused and we stay open, and we just continue to we continue to discern or exercise discernment as like information flows in, and just continue to reassess and then go from there and make another decision, stay open, right? And I imagine that's the big takeaway from today's conversation is, these are some of our core values, but the openness, I imagine, in addition to taking responsibility for yourself, because for me, those are the number 1 and 2. Like 1, 2, first things that came to mind when I thought of values, those are the first thing that came up. And I imagine that's a big reason why you and I both are where we're at today.
For sure. And coincidentally, openness is my first one.
Oh, is it your first one? Okay.
And I wrote my values. That was the first thing I thought of. And it's completely changed how I view the world, how I create my story since I put this down.
Yeah.
Now that I've had a chance to write it out, to discuss it with you, the responsibility is now being held accountable by you, by my partner, by my training partners, by people I share my story with and that I'm open with, right? That's one piece I don't think we really touched on, is like how do we want to share our story? How do we want to open up to other people? Mm-hmm. Right? And that can be a completely different discussion.
Yeah. Well, I mean, considering that we're getting close to an hour here, I imagine it might be a good topic of discussion moving forward for the following podcast. What are your thoughts on that?
Perfect. Yeah, we'll make sure that happens. What are you? To wrap this up, what would you like to promote for your coaching? Like, what do you do? What do you do best?
Mm-hmm. So within my coaching practice, in my brick and mortar location in San Diego, California, I practice and I coach movement and strength training. So I encourage my clients, or I empower my clients to take the responsibility for themselves in living a healthy lifestyle. And part of living a healthy lifestyle is moving your body daily and regularly and purposefully as well. So if you're someone who is looking to build some awareness with their body as far as their movement capabilities go and increase their strength capacities, and using very specific language per our conversation last time, my studio is the place for that. And when you come in, you'll see a lot of these values posted up on the wall of my studio, and like the openness, like it's the first thing that you'll get. If I make a mistake or if I say something that's incorrect, then I find out, I'll admit it. I have that openness, I have that willingness to say, hey, look, I was wrong. But like that's how we all get better, right? We talk about something, like maybe there's something someone asked me and I don't know, right? I'll do my best to think, like, do I know how I can answer this? And like, no, maybe I don't. But that makes me want to go out and learn more. So coming back to like people who want to work with me, if you're in the San Diego area and you want to move better, you want to get stronger, you want to become healthier doing just those things, you can contact me and go on my website, swaseyfitness.com, or my Instagram. I'm slowly starting to spend a little bit more time on there now, but not necessarily mindlessly, but more so intentionally with my social media usage. And you can reach me at Swasey_fitness on Instagram as well. So if you like to do movement or strength training, you're in the San Diego area, that's how I can best help you currently. How about yourself, Gunnar?
I love it. So I do all of my coaching remote, and my strongest impact on an individual right now is working through stories and using mental performance skills to open up the world around you, the world that you want to live in. So this whole discussion, the whole reason we're doing this podcast in my mind is to share some of those techniques and share some of those discussions. Really, this is the what it is. And if you want to know how and how to apply it to yourself, I am open, open to coaching, and typically do a session every week with people and meet people where they are. That's very important, right? If I can meet someone where they are, you don't have to show up being world class, because that doesn't matter. It matters about being your best self, your best class. And yeah, I'm going to meet you where you are, work on mental skills that are going to open up the world for you, see things in different lights, see things in ways that are going to help you perform in business, at home, in sport, whatever it may be. That's what I do. And I can do that from anywhere, and I can help uh, dedicated athletes get to that point. I specifically work with a lot of hockey players that are looking to advance their game, because I'm a former hockey player and that's the language I speak. So sports, dedicated athletes, CrossFit, whatever it may be, up your mental game, and that will up your life to the level you want to be.
Right on, right on. Well, thank you, Gunnar.
Yeah. Thank you, Andrew. Till next time. Thanks for listening.